Namaste. Amen and blessed be. I chose to call this sermon Guest at Your Table for a few, actually Guest at the Table, for a few different reasons. First is that we're actually running a campaign with the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee called Guest at Your Table. Now, Caitlin told you about it a couple of weeks ago, and the kids sent you home with decorated cans to collect change in. The second reason for the Guest at Your Table title is that as we consider the theme of covenant this month at Tapestry, we consider how we might welcome others into our congregational home. And the third reason is that more and more I've come to realize that we're all guests at the table, really. For each one of us, a table full of opportunity, beauty, and love is spread out before us. Most of what we have to do in life is show up and be grateful and pass the peas to the person next to us. But let's go back for a minute to the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee project that we're participating in. I spoke a little bit about the UUSC last week. You may remember the organization was created to help evacuate refugees from Nazi-occupied Europe just before World War II. It's an amazing history, but far more inspiring than their history is their work today. Now, Guest at Your Table is a fundraising effort by the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, and you're invited to take one of those little cans home and keep it on your table or wherever it is that you eat, and leave it there, as if you had a guest at your table for the month. If you feel moved to contribute a little bit at every meal, that's great. Or if at the end of the month, if you feel like having a guest stay, then, or if you feel moved, then you can write a check at the end of the month. Either way, however you want to do it is fine. But I wanted to highlight the work of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee today, not just as a fundraising pitch. It's a great organization to give to, but more, I wanted to talk about them because I think we can learn from the kind of work that UUSC does around the world. Now, there are a lot of wonderful relief organizations making a difference out there, but the thing that makes UUSC so special is that it always works in partnership with existing organizations on the ground. It's something that I've been especially sensitive to since I worked with the Peace Corps. In 2001, I served in West Africa, and it was an amazing time. I was a water and sanitation volunteer, so our goal was to develop clean drinking water in the villages and to educate people about basic sanitation issues. But that's not really what I did. What I really did was walk around the village. Every day I walked, and I met elders and traditional leaders. I went to people's fields. I went to health clinics. I went to the market. For 6 months, I walked around the village meeting people. And there weren't any construction projects. There was only learning and building relationships. Just as we were beginning to talk about possibly building some latrines, that's when the political situation in the country got messy and our group was evacuated. Now, of course, people want to hear what I did in the Peace Corps, how I helped people, and it would be a lot easier to tell them that I educated about clean drinking water and I built latrines. But the truth is, I didn't have time to do any of that sort of work because it took 6 months to get to know the people in the village, of only probably 500. It took 6 months to lay the groundwork for any meaningful help. One of the things that we talked a lot about in Peace Corps was cadeau mentality or gift mentality. It's the idea that helping is a matter of giving a gift and then walking away. Whether it's a gift of a water well or a new school building or a health clinic. We saw over and over again communities asked for and Westerners gave these quick fix solutions. No matter if there were no mechanics to fix that fancy well when it broke down, or if there was money to pay the teachers to work in that new school, or if there were supplies for the medical clinic. The developing world is literally littered with gifts, expensive pieces of infrastructure that weren't the right solution to the problem. The alternative, the type of work that the UUSC is committed to, is much more embedded type of aid. Instead of giving gifts that offer instant gratification, the UUSC works with existing structures on the ground. They may be aid organizations or collectives of women or religious groups. Like in Japan, after the tsunami, the UUSC funneled its efforts through Buddhist congregations there because they were there. They knew what the problems were and how to help. And if there's not an organization, the UUSC just starts drawing people together to have a conversation, and they talk and they talk and they talk until they start to understand themselves as a group of problem solvers. Now, the UUSC models to us a different way of offering our gifts. In time for the holiday season and gift giving, and as we focus on covenant and our shared gifts here at Tapestry, let us take a cue from them. Let us remember that the gift of our presence is just as powerful as the gift of our money. The most powerful wisdom can't be bought with money, after all. The most powerful wisdom, the kind of wisdom that we need to change our world, is a collective wisdom. Now, beyond the UUSC Guest at Your Table program, I use this title because it's a helpful way for us to understand our welcome as a community. As we consider welcoming others into our spiritual home, we can learn a lot from the basic rules of hospitality. Like in Thailand, don't put food in your mouth with your fork. You only use your fork to shove it onto your spoon. In the Middle East and India or parts of Africa, don't eat with your left hand. That's largely because your left hand is associated with bodily functions, so it's considered dirty. In Mexico, never eat a taco with a knife or a fork because they think it looks kooky, and even worse, it's snobby. It's like eating a burger with silverware. In Chile, don't eat anything with your hands, even French fries. When drinking coffee with Bedouins in the Middle East, shake your cup at the end, otherwise they'll keep refilling your cup. In France, don't eat your bread before the meal. You eat your bread with the meal. But it's okay to put that bread on the table. In fact, it's better to put it on the table beside your plate than actually on your plate. And in Italy, don't ask for Parmesan cheese for your pizza or any other time unless it's specifically offered to you, because putting Parmigiano on your pizza is a sin. It's like putting Jell-O on a fine chocolate mousse. See, it's simple. As we welcome guests at our table and into our church home, we should abide by the basic rules of hospitality. So hopefully you get my point. The truth is, we don't all have the same expectations about how to be at one another's table or in one another's church. We're a mix of generations and different cultures. Our expectations of behavior may not be as varied as I mentioned around the world, but there are differences. As I was putting together that list of global dining etiquette, I realized something, though. Even in the midst of all that possible offense that could be caused in the dining scenarios around the world, it's probably safe to assume that a person breaking bread with you is not trying to offend you. If they've joined you for a meal, they're not trying to offend you. You just do things differently. That doesn't give us carte blanche to ignore others' feelings, but please recognize that if someone has gone out of his or her way to walk through that door, it's because they want to be here at Tapestry. They want to be a part of this community. They want to be here with you. And although you may have different expectations of what to do in church, expectations about polite conversation, or musical taste, or appropriate dress, or anything else, everyone is here to share in this feast together. If you're offended by someone else's behavior, there's a very, very good chance that it was an accident. You might be best served by noticing your own behavior and ask an honest, respectful question about the difference. Now, finally, the third reason I chose this title of Guest at Your Table was that I've realized that we're all guests, really. It's a hard thing to remember when we've worked hard to make a contribution, when we've welcomed others, and when we've settled in here. You've probably settled into the exact chair that you're sitting in now. We forget that each one of us is a guest at this feast laid out before us. You're not the host, but a guest. This is not your church. It's not my church, nor does it belong to any other single person. It's here to be the embodiment of our shared ideals, an embodiment of hope and love, and we're all guests. We're called to make room for whoever else would join us at this feast. Now, talking about the type of community that Unitarian Universalists build, the Reverend John Burens writes, "It's about having the faith that we can together feed the many who are hungry. Because just like Jesus is said to have fed 5,000 with 2 fishes and a few loaves of bread with plenty left over, we need to operate out of an awareness of abundance, not a model of scarcity." It's a story that I think most of us are familiar with. Having only 2 fish and a few loaves of bread, Jesus is said to have fed 5,000 people. And one of the most celebrated miracles in the Bible. But the interesting piece is that that miracle doesn't rest in one person's hands alone. A lot of those Bible miracles do. I mean, the water into wine, the parting of the sea, like it's one person doing a magic trick. But this miracle is different. The miracle is created by the power of a community sharing together. In many ways, our community is a story of loaves and fishes. I've seen people's lives changed here. I've seen miraculous relationships occur. It's a table overflowing with abundance. And the truth is we are all guests at this table. No single person made that miracle occur, and no single person makes a community. We have a wonderful party here, and it is growing. You may have noticed, but we need a little more room at the table for us all to enjoy, and I'm not talking figuratively anymore. Our adult attendance in worship is pushing the limits of comfortable, and our children's program is busting at the seams. In the world of challenges, that's actually a very good challenge to have. But still, the challenge remains. We are responsible for making room at this table for others who want to come and enjoy the feast. So we're looking at ways to do that. In just 2 years, our lease on this rental space will expire. And 2 years is going to fly by. So in that time, at the end of 2 years, we'll face an option of either renewing this lease or renting somewhere else or buying a different property somewhere. So your board of trustees is putting together a team to figure out the financial realities of each of these options. And in a few months, they'll start approaching you all for input. But I want you to know that this isn't a contest to keep up with the Joneses, to look like that church that we drive past on Alicia on our way here. It's not an effort to build an institution. Our shared goal is to make room at the table for anyone who would join this kooky party. But we need to relieve some of that space crunch a little more quickly. So between now and that 2-year mark, it's likely that we will add a second service. So in the next month or so, I'll start conversations with some of the groups that will affect most directly. And nothing's going to change overnight, and you'll have plenty of opportunity to have your opinion heard. But it's likely that sometime soon we're going to ask you to scoot your chair over just a little bit to make room at the table for a few more people. And that's a good thing. I want this community to make room for the guests and to grow, partially because I believe in my own message, but far more importantly, I want Tapestry to make room at the table because I believe in your message as a community. The love that you have demonstrated to one another is worth sharing with more people. Now, this congregation, we all know this from the people that we talk to, is surrounded by a sea of people hungry for a different way of living in the world. And it's time to welcome them to the feast. So this sermon, and in fact this whole month of covenant, has felt a little inward focused. It's a little navel gazing. But don't think that what we've discussed applies only to Tapestry. We're not isolationists or separatists by any means, and I've said this before. I want you to think of this community as your laboratory for testing out new things, for more life-affirming ways of living, and take what you learn here as an experiment out into the world. As we learn from the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee and their Guest at Your Table program, the best kind of knowledge is collective knowledge. And the best kind of gift isn't one that just makes the giver feel better. It's a gift that strengthens relationships and empowers both the giver and the receiver. Not just at Tapestry, but every day as we live in this globalized world, we're called to understand that different people have different customs and habits. Some may seem curious, or utterly bizarre, or inefficient, or even offensive. But when we encounter a different way of being in the world, we may be better off letting different just be different, and not assigning intention or offense. And finally, we're all guests at this miraculous table, here at Tapestry and in the world beyond these walls. For each one of us, a table full of opportunity, beauty, and love is spread out before us. Most of what we have to do is to show up, to be grateful, and to pass the peas to the person next to us. Amen.